Today we're going to talk about filler migration. So if you've ever had your lips treated a few times and they're starting to look puffy or unnatural, then I'm going to tell you why that is, because there's two main reasons for filler migration, and actually one of the reasons is very rarely talked about. I'm Dr. Martin Kinsella. I'm a UK-based aesthetic doctor with over 20 years of experience, and I've treated thousands of lip augmentations. So before we start, let's just run through some very basic anatomy of the lips. So firstly, we have this area above the lip, which is called the philtrum. It's basically the skin above the lip. Then we have the vermilion of the lip, which is the pink or the red part of the lip here. And separating the philtrum and the vermilion is the vermilion border, which is the border right along the edge of the lip. And now on the model, I've highlighted the two muscles that we need to know about. We have the pars marginalis, which is the muscle located within the body of the lip, and we have the thinner pars peripherales, which runs around just under the skin. The pars marginalis is a much thicker muscle, pars peripherales is thinner and weaker. So the first reason for filler migration, and this is the one that people often think causes all filler migration, which it doesn't, but it is a cause, is when people tend to place the filler directly onto or in the vermilion border. In most cases, when you're trying to make the lip size bigger or add volume to the lip, placing filler directly onto the vermilion border or into the vermilion border is not always ideal. And the reason why is it overfills the vermilion border and gives it an unnatural appearance. Too much filler on the vermilion border will make the lip look puffy, swollen, and give it quite an unnatural shape with almost like a rolled, overfilled edge. So to avoid the common issue, what I do is when I inject filler, I will always inject it just under the vermilion border, and you'll see that on my demonstration videos. So my needle is always about 1 millimeter or 2 below if I'm working on the upper lip, or above if I'm working on the lower lip, to avoid placing the filler directly onto it, to avoid that puffiness on the edge. However, injecting into the vermilion border isn't, in my opinion, the most common cause of the migration that we tend to see. When you think of migration, what people mean usually is when the filler has moved into this area and is inflating the skin around the lip. In many cases, we can't directly blame injecting filler into the vermilion border for causing this type of migration. It's something else. The cause is simply too much filler. That can mean you've had too much filler placed in one treatment, but much more commonly, it's because you're having filler injections repeated too frequently. Lots of people have their fillers topped up every 6 months. At 6 months, not all of the filler that was injected has completely degraded, so there will be filler left. And when you're injecting into the body of the lip, no matter how well it's placed, if there is already filler in there and there's too much filler, then that filler will simply move up, and it will move in the path of least resistance. And as I said before, this muscle in the body, the pars marginalis, is thick and strong, and the pars peripherales is thinner and weaker. So when there's physically too much filler being added into the lip, the filler will push through into the weaker area and start to surround and cause puffiness in the skin around the lips. So how do you avoid this type of migration? Quite simply, you need to have your filler treatments more spaced out, so less frequently, and make sure that you're not having large amounts of volume put in any one sitting. So ideally, get your patients to come back and repeat their injections at least 9 to 12 months down the line. It's fine to top up if you need to add a tiny bit more filler a month or 2 later, or if you need to correct any asymmetry, but don't repeat the whole treatment and have the same amount of filler injected in within 9 to 12 months. I also want to touch on vermilion border injections. As I said before, injecting on the vermilion border, especially if you're trying to volumize the lips, has a high risk of causing an unnatural lip appearance afterwards. But that doesn't mean that I never inject the vermilion border. If you have a slightly older patient with thinner skin, a little bit like the age of the patient that this silicone head represents, you will notice that there's a bit of thinning of the skin, there's some fine lines around the mouth. But most commonly, what happens is we lose the definition of the vermilion border. In this model, there's still quite a nice definition, but in reality, that definition will be less. Placing a very small amount of dermal filler directly onto this vermilion border can improve the sharpness and the contrast of the lip, just to give them a little bit more definition. The most important thing to remember here is if you're doing this, then always use a very light filler. So fillers come in different strengths or thicknesses. You have thick fillers to volumize parts of the face, maybe in the cheeks, the jaw. In this case, we can use slightly heavier lip fillers to volumize the lip, but you can also use very lightweight fillers that are suitable for more fine lines and inject those in the lip. It's not really about the brand of filler, it's more importantly the thickness of the filler. So if you're using one of the lightest fillers in the range, in my case often Mildly Precise, you can place this type of filler on the vermilion border in small conservative amounts, then you'll avoid creating excess puffiness or an unnatural lip appearance. So if you're injecting lips a lot and you want to avoid filler migration and giving the classic duck lips appearance, then here are two important points. Firstly, try where possible to avoid injecting directly into the vermilion border unless, as I said before, it's an older person and you want to create a tiny bit of definition. But if you're volumizing the lips, avoid injecting into the vermilion border, inject just under it. The second point is to avoid injecting too much filler too often. So always keep the amount of filler used in any one treatment below or up to 1 cc or 1 syringe. Always remember that heavier fillers will migrate more because they're thicker, and try to keep your treatments more spaced out. Try to avoid having them done every 6 months and push it to 9 or 12 months to reduce the risk. So there you go. This is my approach and opinion on how to minimize lip filler migration. It's worked for all of my patients that I've treated and all the practitioners that I've taught in the past. And by adhering to these rules, this is where we can always get the safest but most natural results.